Okay, let's unpack this. Because late last year, around late 2023, there was this one nation taking what felt like a global victory lap.
Yeah, they really were. It was everywhere.
Right. They had achieved the impossible. They were the only country in the entire European Union where homelessness wasn't just like plateauing, it was actively falling year after year.
Defying all the trends we see in other modern countries, honestly.
Exactly. I mean, you had urban planners from all over the world making these pilgrimages to study what looked like a permanent cure to a crisis that, well, it basically plagues every major city on Earth.
And then the data changed.
And then the data changed.
Right.
February 2025, the latest numbers dropped, and they showed a staggering 20% spike in homelessness in just one single year.
Which is just a massive, catastrophic reversal.
It really is. So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are analyzing the spectacular 11-year rise and the honestly shocking self-inflicted reversal of Finland's housing miracle.
It's such a fascinating sequence of events to look at.
Because we always hear homelessness is this unsolvable permanent crisis, right?
Why?
But they proved it isn't. And to make sense of this, we've got some incredible sources lined up.
We really do. We're looking at the official Finnish statistics, the VARKI data from November 2024, which they just reported in February 2025.
Plus the latest reports from the Y-Foundation, Amnesty International, the OECD, and that big HUD User Cityscape Journal review.
What's really fascinating here is that when you look at all these data sets side by side, a very clear, very mechanical picture emerges.
Mechanical is a good word for it.
Right, because we are not looking at some sudden moral failing of a population or, a cultural shift. We're looking at a real-time demonstration of what happens when a government deliberately alters the financial levers of its own housing policy.
So our mission today is to pull apart the mechanics of that exact machine.
Exactly. We need to understand the whole arc.
Right. We're going to examine how Finland historically tore down its emergency shelters to build unconditional housing. We'll debate those HUD findings on whether this model can actually work in a massive, fragmented place like the U.S.
Which is always a big debate.
Oh, always. And finally, we have to analyze the sober reality of why the Finnish government's recent austerity measures caused their entire system to just, well, fracture.
So, to really understand why their system is currently breaking under pressure, we have to go back. We have to look at the 20th century paradigm that they rebelled against back in 2008.
The system that, let's be real, the rest of the world still largely uses today.
Right. And that paradigm is widely known in the industry as the staircase model.
The staircase model. Okay, break that down for us.
Well, the underlying philosophy of the staircase is conditionality. Basically, housing is positioned at the very top of a metaphorical staircase.
Like a prize you have to win.
Exactly. And an individual has to earn their way up step by proving that they are compliant, by demonstrating good behavior.
From a purely administrative standpoint, you can kind of see why a bureaucracy would design it that way, right?
Sure. I mean, it makes sense on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, if a city has limited public funds and, a massive shortage of permanent apartments, they want a filtering mechanism.
They want to allocate their most expensive permanent resources to the people who have proven they won't cause property damage or fall back into crisis.
Right. So progression usually starts with what, like a cot and a big overnight shelter?
Yeah, congregate shelter.
Yeah.
And if you obey curfews, you stay sober, you don't get into fights, then maybe you're allowed to move to a transitional hostel.
Okay, so that's step 2.
Right. And from there, if you actively engage with psychiatric care or, say, addiction counseling, you might graduate to a halfway house.
And then finally, the apartment.
Only when you are officially deemed housing ready, yes. Then you get the ultimate prize, the permanent apartment.
But here is the major friction point. And this is exactly why the Finnish working group rejected this entire concept in their 2007 report. Humans experiencing severe trauma don't operate like predictable variables on a spreadsheet.
They really don't. The whole staircase model assumes that a person can achieve this incredibly complex physiological and psychological stability while living in an environment that is, by definition, unstable.
It's like demanding someone learn how to swim while they are actively drowning.
That's a great analogy, actually.
Right. Like you need the raft, the home, before you can practice the strokes, which would be the recovery part.
Exactly. Asking someone to conquer a severe opioid addiction or, manage untreated schizophrenia while they're sleeping in a room with 50 strangers.
Where they're probably terrified for their physical safety.
And their belongings. It's a complete setup for failure.
Right.
And when they inevitably break a rule or relapse, what happens?
They get kicked back down the stairs.
Right. They're demoted. They lose whatever temporary housing they had managed to earn.
Which brings us to that 2007 Finnish working group report. It was called Name on the Door, or Nimi Vesa. I was reading through the translated abstracts of this, and the shift in their policy framework is just striking.
It really was a total paradigm shift.
They basically argued that trying to treat a medical or psychological crisis without first establishing a secure private baseline is just mathematically inefficient.
Yes. It flips the whole concept. It treats housing as an intervention rather than a reward.
So when the Finnish government adopted this as national policy in 2008, the PAVO programs, right?
That's right, the PAVO program.
They inverted the staircase. The policy, which we know as Housing First, dictates that the very first step is signing a standard open-ended lease for a permanent apartment.
Unconditionally. You get the key, your name goes on the door.
And crucially, that lease is not contingent on you engaging with support services.
This is the part that a lot of people struggle to wrap their heads around.
Because it sounds crazy to some people. If the tenant refuses to speak to a substance abuse counselor, they do not lose their apartment.
Right. They only lose the apartment if they violate the standard terms of a regular lease.
Like failing to pay rent.
Exactly. Or severely damaging the property, just like any other renter in the world.
But here, the state ensures the rent is subsidized, and social workers actually make house calls to help prevent those standard lease violations.
I think we really have to pause and consider the political risk taken by the Finnish housing minister back in 2008 to adopt this.
Oh, massive risk. It wasn't just a local pilot program. They made it national policy.
Right, because from a PR perspective, giving unconditional state-subsidized apartments to individuals who might be actively using narcotics, that is a very difficult policy to defend to a middle-class taxpayer.
You could just imagine the headlines.
Exactly. It requires a government to look at the long-term macroeconomic data, which consistently shows that a chronically homeless person costs the state way more in emergency room visits, policing, and judicial costs than the simple price of rent.
It's prioritizing the math over the short-term political optics.
Yes, exactly.
But, having a philosophy like name on the door is one thing. Practically speaking, where do you put the people?
That is the ultimate logistical hurdle.
Because if a government decrees that everyone gets an apartment rather than a shelter bed, they immediately run into a concrete problem. You can't run a housing first model while maintaining a massive shelter system.
No, you have to physically re-engineer the city's infrastructure. Finland didn't just announce a new philosophy. They systematically dismantled their existing emergency infrastructure.
They literally took sledgehammers to it.
They did. They forced the bureaucracy's hand. And the most prominent symbol of this, the flagship, was Alpakatu 25.
Alpakatu 25 in Helsinki. Here's where it gets really interesting. Looking at the archival descriptions, this place operated as your classic, massive congregate shelter.
It was established by the Salvation Army way back in 1937, right?
Yep, 1937.
Yeah.
And by the 2000s, it was this massive 250-bed dormitory.
The largest shelter in the country. It was basically the ultimate fallback option for the city's social services.
Like, if an individual fell through every other crack in the system, they could always be sent to a cot at Alpakatu 25.
Right. But in 2010, the government and the Salvation Army made a huge move. They closed it down.
And they didn't just rebrand it or give it a fresh coat of paint.
Right.
They gutted the interior down to the studs.
The whole thing.
And when the building reopened in 2012, those 250 temporary dormitory beds have been completely replaced by roughly 80 self-contained, independent, permanent apartments.
Each with its own private kitchen and bathroom, and on-site support staff.
Now, the math there is wild to me.
It is, but it's the most important part of the story.
Right, because if I'm an urban planner looking at that renovation, I see a catastrophic loss of capacity. You just reduced your ability to shelter human beings by nearly 70%.
Well, if your metric for success is simply managing the homeless population, then yeah, it looks like a massive failure.
You lost 170 beds.
Exactly. But if your metric is actually ending homelessness, it is a requirement. A shelter bed is a daily recurring liability. An apartment is a permanent resolution.
That makes a lot of sense.
By drastically reducing the number of available emergency beds, the Finnish state basically engaged in a burn the ships strategy.
They burned the ships.
Yeah, the municipalities could no longer rely on these giant warehouses to just hide the problem. They were forced to acquire real housing because the temporary options literally did not exist anymore.
And it worked. Between 2008 and 2017, the number of homeless people living in hostels or boarding houses plummeted by roughly 3/4.
But as you said earlier, burning the ships only works if you actually have a plan to survive once you're on land.
Right. Destroying a 250-bed shelter means you immediately have 170 people who need permanent housing that very same day.
You can't just leave them on the street.
Exactly. So to house a nation, to absorb that kind of volume, a government needs an acquisition machine that operates at scale.
And that is where the Y-Foundation comes in. Yes, say it.
The nonprofit engine in the center of all this.
Right, they're the social landlord that actually executes the state's mandate.
So, led for a long time by their former CEO, Juha Kakinen, they amassed this massive inventory over time, something like 18,000 apartments.
That's right.
But wait, push back on the logistics here for me, just to clarify for you listening. How does a nonprofit acquire 18,000 units in a competitive real estate market without just bankrupting itself or causing insane inflation in local property values?
Well, they use a dual strategy, and it's heavily backed by state capital.
Okay, so the state is funding the machine.
Yes. The Finnish state provides significant grants and subsidized loans, and the Y-Foundation uses this capital to fund new construction projects, which expands the overall housing supply over time.
But building takes years.
Exactly. So to address the immediate needs, they aggressively purchase existing individual flats on the private market.
Which brings us to the concept of scattered site housing.
This is crucial. Scattered site housing is units dispersed across ordinary residential buildings, not concentrated campuses.
So wait, if I'm a student or a retiree living in Helsinki, my next-door neighbor in a completely normal apartment building might be a formerly homeless person placed there by the Y-Foundation.
Yes, absolutely. And that decentralization is a highly effective way to neutralize one of the biggest political hurdles in urban development, which is NIMBYism.
Not in my backyard.
Right. Think about it. When a city proposes building a dedicated 200-unit affordable housing complex for formerly homeless individuals, the surrounding neighborhood usually organizes against it.
Oh, immediately. They cite concerns over property values, crime, traffic.
But the Y-Foundation avoids those zoning board battles entirely by decentralizing. If they buy one single condo on the 4th floor of a standard middle-class building, there's no public hearing.
The formerly homeless individual just moves in.
And the neighbors on the 3rd and 5th floors just have a new neighbor.
That is brilliant.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really about social cohesion, because isolating people in homeless campuses breeds stigma. It concentrates poverty.
It recreates the chaos of a shelter.
Exactly. Scattered site housing forces societal integration. They share elevators with people going to work. They shop at the same local grocery stores.
And the support services, like the psychiatric nurses or debt counselors, they just visit them at their individual flats.
Right. The state funds the support. The municipalities coordinate the care, and the Y-Foundation handles the property management.
It's an incredibly clean division of labor. And with this philosophy aligned, and the Y-Foundation's supply machine just humming along, Finland entered this golden era.
An unparalleled winning streak, really.
11 straight years, from 2008 to 2023. Total homelessness dropped by about 30%.
And the most impressive part was the drop in long-term homelessness.
Yeah, that's the toughest demographic, right? People who've been on the streets for years dealing with compounding physical and mental health issues.
The hardest population to reach. And Finland reduced that specific demographic by over 1/3. By some measures, up to 2/3 by 2022.
They became the only EU country where homelessness declined year after year. Which, of course, naturally leads us to the great transferability debate.
The American skeptic argument.
Exactly. Let's steelman the American skeptic here. Because when you present these statistics to policymakers in the U.S., the pushback is immediate.
It's always the same arguments.
They say, look, Finland is small, it's homogenous, they have 5.5 million people, high taxes, and this long history of centralized social housing. You cannot just copy-paste this model onto a large, fragmented, low-tax nation with 330 million people and thousands of independent local governments controlling their own zoning.
Right. They argue that the U.S. system is just fundamentally too different.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, if you're sitting in a major American city right now? Is this whole thing just some cute Nordic fairy tale that we could never pull off?
Well, Let's defend the data impartially here because the HUD Use Us or Cityscape Journal actually did a comprehensive review of this exact question.
To see if the Finnish model is mathematically transferable.
Right, and they specifically looked at those variables, the size and the cultural homogeneity. Because the assumption is that in a homogeneous society, people have higher social trust, so they're more willing to pay high taxes to house their neighbors.
Right, that's always the talking point.
But the HUD review concluded that cultural homogeneity is largely a red herring.
A red herring.
Yes. It's often used to just dismiss actionable policy. When you look at the data globally, ethnic or cultural makeup doesn't dictate a city's rate of homelessness.
Okay, so what does?
It's about math and money. The operative drivers are the elasticity of the affordable housing supply and the political will to fund it.
So it's basically just the gap between what the poorest citizens earned and what the cheapest apartment costs.
Precisely. If a society supplies and subsidizes enough housing, homelessness falls at the population level. Size and diversity don't change that math.
That's fascinating. And the HUD report also pointed out this massive difference in how our two countries actually count homeless people, didn't it?
Yes, the counting methodology is completely different.
In the U.S., we use the point in time, or PIT count, right?
Right. The PIT count is a manual census, usually done on a single night in late January. Volunteers basically fan out across the city and count people they see in shelters, on the streets, in tents.
It captures the literal, visible homeless population.
But Finland uses a registry-based system that is much, much stricter. They count what's known as the hidden homeless.
The couch surfers.
Exactly. If a Finnish person loses their apartment and moves into their brother's spare bedroom, they are officially counted as homeless.
Even though they're indoors.
Because they don't have a lease in their own name. In the U.S., that person is almost completely invisible to the PIT count.
Which means Finland's success is even more impressive than it looks on paper. Because they weren't just moving people from the streets to apartments. Their counting criteria were actively seeking out the hidden homeless.
Right. Their definition is much broader, yet they were still driving the numbers down.
But just as the world started treating Finland as this flawless utopia, the data from February 2025 delivered a massive reality check.
A very harsh reality check.
Let's get into the 2025 reversal, which is really the analytical heart of this whole deep dive.
Right. Because after more than a decade of this continuous decline, the trend line just inverted.
The turning point was really 2023 into 2024, where they saw a plateau. And then by February 2025, counting the November 2024 data, a sharp reversal was officially reported.
The numbers are stark. Homelessness rose roughly 20% in a single year.
20%.
Yes. And long-term homelessness, that really tough demographic we talked about, that jumped 29%.
They counted 4,579 single homeless people. That's up 773 individuals. Street sleeping climbed steeply.
The Y-Foundation themselves called it the largest recorded rise in Finnish history.
So let me turn the tone entirely sober here, because as a listener, your immediate assumption is probably, let me guess, a massive migration wave hit the country, or a new, highly addictive synthetic drug hit the streets and broke the system.
Right, you look for an external shock. But this raises a very important question about cause and effect. Because according to the findings from Amnesty International and the Finnish authorities, the primary driver was purely economic.
It was domestic policy.
Yes. Prime Minister Petteri Orpo's government austerity package. The safety net was deliberately dismantled to cut costs, and the result was instantaneous.
Let's look at the specifics of those cuts impartially. Because from a fiscal perspective, if a government is facing a deficit, austerity is a standard macroeconomic tool.
Oh, absolutely. The fiscal intent is standard, but we are analyzing the real-time policy output.
Right. So what exactly did they cut?
They made heavy reductions to the housing allowance. That's the direct subsidy the government pays to low-income renters to bridge the gap between their income and the market rent.
Okay, so that bridge gets weakened.
Exactly. They also tightened Social Security and income support, freezing the indexations so benefits didn't rise with inflation. And they reduced state funding for the production of new affordable housing and support services.
So when you look at who was actually affected, who makes up that 20% spike, it wasn't a new wave of severe addiction cases.
No, mostly it was the hidden homeless and low-income people who had absolutely zero life management problems.
They literally just needed financial help to stay afloat, and when that help vanished, they lost their apartments.
Right. The person crashing on their friend's couch, suddenly that friend's housing allowance is cut, they can't afford rent, and the couch surfer is out on the street.
Wow. It just proves that the housing first model didn't fail conceptually, did it?
Not at all.
It was just starved financially. The austerity measures acted like turning down a dial on a machine that was previously working perfectly. It's like a modern software subscription model.
The subscription model.
Yeah.
That is a great way to think about it.
Under the old staircase system, you buy a shelter, you own the cots, you have the physical asset. But the Finnish model, with scattered site private housing, is like a subscription service for social stability.
Yes. The state pays a monthly premium, the housing allowances, the grants to the Y-Foundation.
And as long as the state pays that subscription fee, the service works. Homelessness drops.
But the second the government decides the subscription is too expensive and cancels the payment,
The screen goes black.
the service stops instantly. And that abrupt spike in 2025 isn't just a sad update to the story. It is the ultimate proof of what homelessness actually is at its core.
Okay, so what this all means is, homelessness is not some fixed, tragic feature of human society.
No.
And it is certainly not just a moral failing of the poorest citizens. It is a literal lever that governments push and pull.
Yes, it is a policy output, responsive in real time in both directions. If you build and subsidize housing, it falls. If you cut benefits, it rises.
The 2025 reversal proves that a durable solution is only as durable as the money that pays for it.
Exactly. The Finnish model remains the best proof of concept on Earth. It proved that if you want to end homelessness, you actually can.
But you have to maintain it. You look at that 11-year slow build of trust, the massive physical infrastructure changes, the cultural shift.
And then the rapid one-year collapse caused by pulling the financial rug out. It reinforces that maintenance is just as critical as innovation.
So to summarize this whole journey we've been on, we started with the radical 2008 name-on-the-door philosophy, the idea that a home is a basic right, not a reward for good behavior.
Then we saw them literally tear down the Alpaca 225 shelter, forcing the system to rely on permanent apartments instead of temporary cots.
We looked at the Y-Foundation's massive success with scattered site housing, which proved you can integrate vulnerable people into normal neighborhoods without destroying social cohesion.
And finally, we analyzed the sobering 2025 austerity cuts, which reversed a decade of progress in a matter of months simply by removing the financial subsidies.
Thank you so much for taking this journey with us, because understanding the mechanics of these systems, understanding how the math actually works, empowers you to look at your own local policies with a much more critical eye.
It really does. It changes how you view the whole problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to leave you with a new angle to ponder, something that builds on everything we've discussed today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the Finnish data conclusively proves that homelessness rises and falls based almost entirely on government budget spreadsheets and housing allowances, what does that say about how we judge the people we see sleeping on our own city streets?
That is a tough question.
Are we really looking at individual personal failures? Or are we simply staring at the physical human artifacts of our own state budgets? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.